Honestly, I think though with Pac and Biggie, I think if them two would have sat and talked, I think they would have worked it out.
They would have worked it out, but it would have been.
And I think a lot of the stuff that was happening, Biggie didn't know.
Yeah.
Like Puff was moving behind.
He would have had
back.
to move away from Diddy.
Yeah.
And Pac would have had to get away from Suge. Then they could have talked. Suge was not going to let him talk to him. You saw what they did to Snoop when Snoop tried to say, I like Diddy. Yeah. I like Puffy. I like Snoop. Snoop said, I like Puffy. I like Biggie. He on a plane with a fucking steak knife trying to not get beat up by a whole death row, right? Because they was going to hurt him. Pac didn't speak to him no more.
No, yeah, that was their last conversation.
Pac didn't speak to him. Pac shut him out.
He's like, yo, cuz.
Because guess why Pac shut him out? He's riding with Suge. He's riding with Death Row. So Suge, Pac would have never been able to have that conversation with Biggie. And Biggie would have never been able to have that conversation.
For nearly 30 years, the murder of Tupac Shakur has remained one of the biggest mysteries in music history. Investigators chased countless leads, conspiracy theories spread across the internet, and millions of fans were left wondering who was truly responsible. Then everything changed when Dwayne "Keffy D" Davis was arrested. But now, the story has taken another unexpected turn. Recent court filings, old police interviews, and previously discussed statements have once again put some of the biggest names in hip-hop under the spotlight. Some people believe the evidence finally explains what happened, while others argue much of it is still based on allegations, speculation, or disputed accounts. Either way, the conversation surrounding Tupac's murder has become more intense than ever. So what actually changed? And why are people once again debating the roles of Diddy, Suge Knight, and even Snoop Dogg? Let's break everything down. The latest wave of attention began after Keffy D, the only person currently charged in Tupac's murder, continued insisting that authorities arrested the wrong man. Despite prosecutors building their case against him, he has publicly maintained his innocence. At the same time, investigators and commentators have revisited years of interviews and statements in which Keffy D described what allegedly happened behind the scenes. One of the biggest reasons Diddy's name keeps resurfacing is because Keffy D has repeatedly claimed that Diddy offered money to have Tupac killed. Those allegations have circulated for years, but Diddy has consistently denied any involvement in Tupac's murder and has never been convicted of any crime related to the case. Still, the claims continue attracting attention because Keffy D discussed them in multiple interviews long before he was arrested. Supporters of this theory often point to the growing tension between Tupac and Diddy during the mid-1990s. At the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, both camps were locked in one of the most public feuds in hip-hop history. Every interview, every song, and every appearance seemed to escalate the conflict. Some commentators have even revisited an earlier incident involving Sarah Chapman, who later had a child with Diddy. According to various reports, Tupac was photographed with Chapman in 1995, leading some people to speculate that the situation added another layer of personal tension between the two men. However, there has never been official confirmation that this incident played any role in the events that followed, making it one of many claims that remains heavily debated. What has attracted even more attention recently are recordings from Keffy D's interviews with investigators. During questioning, detectives repeatedly asked him about conversations he allegedly had with Diddy. Keffy D acknowledged speaking with him on several occasions, and those exchanges have since become some of the most widely shared pieces of evidence discussed online. For many viewers, these interviews appear convincing. For others, they're simply the claims of one man whose credibility has long been questioned. That disagreement is exactly why the case continues dividing public opinion nearly 3 decades later. While much of the recent discussion has centered on Diddy, investigators have also continued examining another key figure, Suge Knight. According to several investigators who worked the case over the years, there were always unanswered questions surrounding Tupac's relationship with Death Row Records during the final months of his life. At the time, Tupac was one of the biggest artists in the world, but reports suggested he was nearing the end of his recording contract. If that happened, he would have been free to sign elsewhere or pursue complete independence. That possibility has fueled years of speculation. Some people believe it gave certain individuals financial motives to keep Tupac from leaving. Others argue there's never been enough evidence to support those theories. Even today, those questions remain unresolved. Adding to the mystery are comments made by Tupac's biological father, who later expressed regret over his son's relationship with Suge Knight. In interviews, he suggested Tupac viewed Suge as a father figure and believed he was eventually betrayed financially. Those emotional remarks reignited public debate, but they do not establish criminal responsibility. Investigators also questioned the security surrounding Tupac on the night he was shot. Considering Suge Knight's reputation and experience in personal security, many people have wondered why Tupac wasn't surrounded by greater protection after tensions had already escalated throughout the weekend. That question has never completely disappeared. Years later, Suge himself made statements that only fueled more speculation. During one interview, he recalled visiting Tupac in the hospital and described him as laughing and joking before his condition worsened. Critics immediately questioned that account because other reports have suggested Tupac was in critical condition. Whether those recollections were inaccurate, misunderstood, or something else entirely remains another unresolved piece of the puzzle. As investigators continued reviewing evidence over the years, one detective reportedly considered the possibility that rival gangs may not have acted alone and that other influential figures could have benefited from what happened. Those investigative theories have circulated publicly for years, but they were never proven in court. Then, another familiar name entered the conversation once again: Snoop Dogg. Unlike many conspiracy theories circulating online, Snoop's connection comes largely from his own interviews describing the final days before Tupac's death. He openly acknowledged that he and Tupac weren't on good terms after disagreements over comments involving Bad Boy Records. According to Snoop, the friendship that once existed between them had become strained just days before the Las Vegas trip. He even revealed that, during one trip with Death Row, he felt so uncomfortable that he kept a weapon nearby for protection while traveling with members of the entourage. Those remarks highlighted just how tense the atmosphere had become within the camp itself. Because of those disagreements, some people later questioned whether Snoop knew more than he had publicly shared. However, no evidence has established that he participated in the murder, and he has consistently denied any involvement. At this point, three names, Diddy, Suge Knight, and Snoop Dogg, had all become subjects of public speculation for different reasons. But speculation and evidence are two very different things. To understand why investigators focused on certain individuals and why Keffe D eventually became the only person charged, we have to go back to September 7, 1996, and carefully examine what actually happened that night in Las Vegas. On the night of September 7, 1996, Tupac Shakur traveled to Las Vegas alongside Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight to attend Mike Tyson's heavyweight title fight at the MGM Grand. It was supposed to be another high-profile night surrounded by fans and celebrities. Instead, it became one of the most tragic nights in hip-hop history. After the fight ended, surveillance cameras captured Tupac and several members of his entourage confronting Orlando Anderson inside the MGM Grand. Investigators later concluded that the confrontation stemmed from an earlier dispute involving Anderson and members of Death Row's circle. The fight lasted only moments before security stepped in and separated everyone, but many investigators believe that brief altercations set the rest of the night's events in motion. After leaving the casino, Tupac and Suge returned to change clothes before heading toward Club 66-2, where Tupac was expected to make an appearance. As they drove down the Las Vegas Strip in Suge's black BMW, witnesses described Tupac as being in high spirits. He leaned out of the passenger window, greeted fans, and enjoyed the attention from people lining the streets. Then, just before midnight, everything changed. As the BMW stopped at a red light near the intersection of Flamingo Road and Covell Lane, a white Cadillac pulled alongside them. Within seconds, multiple shots were fired into the passenger side of the BMW. Tupac was struck several times, while Suge Knight suffered minor injuries. The Cadillac sped away before police arrived. Despite emergency treatment, Tupac died 6 days later from his injuries, leaving investigators with one of the highest-profile unsolved murders in American history. For decades, authorities struggled to build a prosecutable case. Witnesses were reluctant to cooperate, evidence became harder to recover as time passed, and numerous theories circulated without leading to criminal charges. Then Dwayne Keffe D. Davis began speaking publicly. Over the years, Keffe D appeared in multiple interviews describing what he claimed happened that night. In conversations with investigators and later during media appearances, he identified the people who were allegedly inside the white Cadillac and explained how they supposedly found Tupac after leaving the MGM Grand. According to Keffe D's account, his group began searching for Tupac after learning where he was headed. Eventually, they spotted Suge Knight's BMW on the strip and pulled alongside it at the traffic light. Keffe D described the encounter in remarkable detail, explaining how quickly everything unfolded before the Cadillac drove away. Those interviews immediately reignited public interest in the case. Some viewers believed Keffe D was finally telling the truth after years of silence. Others questioned why someone would openly discuss such serious allegations if they weren't true. At the same time, critics argued that many of his stories changed over the years, making it difficult to determine which portions, if any, were completely accurate. The debate only intensified after police revisited recordings from earlier interviews and interrogations. Investigators questioned Keffe D extensively about his alleged conversations with Diddy and about the events leading up to the shooting. Portions of those interviews eventually became public, allowing millions of people to hear investigators pressing him on details that had remained hidden for years. For prosecutors, those statements became an important part of the overall investigation. For the public, they created even more questions. Why would someone discuss details of a murder for years if they weren't involved? And if investigators believed they had enough information decades earlier, why did an arrest take so long? Authorities have explained that the case evolved over many years as new witnesses came forward, additional interviews were conducted, and previously unavailable evidence was reviewed. That process ultimately led to Keffe D becoming the only person charged in connection with Tupac's murder. Even after his arrest, however, Keffe D has continued maintaining that prosecutors have the wrong man. Meanwhile, discussion surrounding Diddy, Suge Knight, and several other figures has continued across social media, podcasts, documentaries, and court filings. Some legal filings have referenced Diddy by name because of earlier allegations made by Keffe D, but those references do not establish criminal responsibility. Diddy has repeatedly denied any involvement in Tupac's murder and has not been charged in connection with the case. Suge Knight's role has also remained a topic of debate because he was driving the BMW that night and survived the attack. Questions surrounding security, Tupac's contract, and various public statements have fueled years of speculation, yet no court has concluded that Suge arranged Tupac's murder. Snoop Dogg has faced online speculation as well, largely because he openly discussed disagreements with Tupac during the final days of his life. Those interviews have often been taken out of context, but investigators have never charged Snoop in connection with the shooting, and he has consistently denied any involvement. As the legal process against Keffe D continues, Tupac's family has also pursued civil action in an effort to seek accountability. Their position is that everyone responsible for Tupac's death should ultimately be identified and held accountable, regardless of how much time has passed. Nearly 30 years later, that's still the biggest question. Who was responsible for one of the most influential artists in music history losing his life? For investigators, the answer currently centers on the criminal case against Keffe D. For many members of the public, however, the broader questions about motive, planning, and possible involvement from others remain unanswered. Whether future court proceedings reveal new evidence or simply reinforce what investigators already believe, one thing is certain: this case continues to capture worldwide attention because it represents far more than an unsolved mystery. It marked the loss of an artist whose influence still shapes music and culture decades later. As new testimony, legal filings, and courtroom arguments continue emerging, separating verified facts from speculation will become more important than ever. Many theories have circulated for years, but ultimately, it will be the evidence presented in court, not internet rumors, that determines how history remembers this case. The search for justice has now stretched across 3 decades. Whether the upcoming proceedings finally provide the answers people have been waiting for remains to be seen. But the next chapter of the Tupac case may prove to be its most significant yet.